In the long, storied history of the British Isles, through the thousands of years of its people, there has never been a more unfairly maligned, a more misunderstood figure than Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. From the hero of the Second World War, an inspiration to alcoholics everywhere, to a man so maligned, statues of him are said to be in poor taste. And a £5 note with his face on, they're looked at with whatever the diet version of scorn is. Has anyone in this country ever been treated so poorly? Personally, as a transsexual, I can't think of any minority groups in history that have faced this level of hatred and derision. And the worst thing about this vicious anti-Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill campaign is... Oh, sorry, I missed some of Sir Winston's titles. Let me start that one over. I want to pay my respects to the great man. The worst thing about this vicious the Right Honourable Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill KGOMCHTDDL FRSRA not that one campaign is that this British legend never did anything wrong. I ask you, how can the man who presided over the end of World War II be anything other than a literal saint? I mean, the NHS came after World War II, the most prestigious institution in our nation's history, and not only did he... Oh, is that right, this script? Vote against its formation 21 times, but that was Attlee's government, shit. Anyway, he was Prime Minister directly following the creation of the NHS, and he didn't destroy it. So, you have to give him that. Oh, well, he won the war for us as well. It's not like the Russians were the ones to liberate... Why are you giving me these facts which are going to disprove them the next line? Unprofessional. Okay, well, he was there, and he smoked like a chimney. Could Stalin do that? I think not. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the virtues of Churchill. His record obviously speaks for itself. What I'm here to do is debunk this ridiculous suggestion that he was some kind of bad guy. I'm here to convince you that Winston Churchill was as perfect a man as has ever ruled this country. I'm Bridget Empire, and this is the Empire Statement.
We meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day.
Part 1. India. What a better place to judge the record of England's favourite son than India, the crown jewel of the empire. Now, history heads among you might recognise that Indian independence came in 1947, in the dark period in British history between 1945 and 1951, where Churchill was kept from his rightful place as Prime Minister by diabolical socialist Clement Attlee, before the country realised the error of its ways and begged for him to come back and save us from all the horrors of full communism. As a side note, whatever you do, do not look up who won the popular vote in 1951. Got it? Good. Clearly, India would never have left the empire if Churchill had remained Prime Minister. After all, it's Churchill. He was a contemporary of Gandhi. Sure, he called Gandhi a bad man and an enemy of the empire while wishing him dead. But what's a bit of banter between friends, eh? With this in mind, I posit that we can learn a lot about the character of Winston Churchill from his handling of India. His opinions on the subject are well documented. He looms large in the country's history. And most importantly of all, Churchill's treatment of the Indian people is one of the main arguments those anti-British Ramonas on the woke left used to argue that he was a racist. So let's examine the evidence and prove good old Winston innocent. In 1943, the world was in the midst of a deadly and all-encompassing war. That war, the one the British were so brave in. Churchill was, of course, one of the good guys in the war, along with US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and name redacted. The logistics of global war are complicated and messy, but thankfully for Britain, India produced a metric fuckton of food that was needed to fight a war on the scale we were fighting. In fact, Bengal had a better than normal harvest at the time. If they were just to feed themselves, they would have been more than satisfied than me after a full English on the morning of Conservative Party conference. There was just one problem with shipping all this food from India, however. The Indian people themselves needed it.
He is seen actually as the precipitator of mass killing because of the policies that he advocated and the policies that he followed in Bengal in 1943.
At the heart of the anger against him, a famine in Bengal. It was triggered by a cyclone and flooding. But many blame Winston Churchill and his government for making the situation worse. It's a painful chapter in India's colonial history. Only a few surviving images show the horror of hunger. Those who didn't die in villages went to cities in search of food. Every day, bodies had to be removed from Kolkata's streets. At least 3 million died, more than 6 times the British Empire's casualties in World War II, raging at the same time.
Now, even I, the most patriotic person on earth, have to admit here that taking food from a continent full of starving people isn't the most ethical decision one could have made here, but you have to think of the historical context here. People make mistakes. I'm sure Churchill wouldn't have presided over the deaths of, hold on, let me check my notes, 2.1 to 3 million people? Shit. Churchill wouldn't have presided over what became known as the Bengal famine if he didn't have good reasons for doing so. There was that war, after all, and eventually he did ship some grain from Australia, but prior to that, he is on record as saying any potential relief efforts sent to India would accomplish little to nothing as Indians breed like rabbits. Presumably, this sounds worse than it is. He must have misspoke. Either way, in private conversation, Churchill said that he hated Indians and that they were a beastly people with a beastly religion, which is obviously just good-natured banter. What a man. But British historian Andrew Roberts agrees with me, saying that these quotes should be considered provocative humour. And really, what is provocative humour? Other than academic for Archbishop of Banterbury? Do people still say banter? Look that one up. Churchill's Secretary of State, Leo Amory, thankfully backs up my theory, referring to Churchill's views on India as not quite sane. In other words, Churchill was an absolute mad lad. He also said that he didn't see much of a difference between Churchill's outlooks and Hitler's, which I'm sure is some kind of mistake because Hitler was one of the baddies. India was also made to lend money to Britain during World War II, which they surely wouldn't have done unless they were good mates with the big man Churchill. To sort this confusion out, the Famine Commission, appointed in 1944 by the British government in India, absolved the British government from all blame and decided the Muslim governor of Bengal was to blame, so that's that. Churchill did nothing wrong. He was misunderstood, perhaps a little too much of a lad for his own good, and clearly not woke enough for so-called historians who think that calling people beastly is the equivalent of, I don't know, starving 3 million of them to death, which he also did. Maybe I should move on. Let's move closer to home. Part 2. Ireland. So maybe Winston Churchill wasn't very woke. Perhaps he said some things about Indians that some people might call fascistic or racist, whatever that means. But surely, we can gain better perspective on the great man through his attitude to the merry peoples of the Emerald Isle. Britain and Ireland, as we all know, have had a long and a long history as neighbours in the North Atlantic. And sure, we had some bad times together, but didn't we have good times too? Remember Live Aid? Wasn't there an Irish in that? Where is Ireland? Dan, are we sure we didn't make it up? We didn't make it up just to make us look bad, did we? Well, real or not, Winston Churchill certainly believed in Ireland, and given his stellar reputation, his can-do attitude, and his war-winning charisma, I'm sure he treated our closest geographical neighbours with the respect they... Churchill was Secretary of State for War during the Irish Revolution in 1916 to 1921. One of his key achievements in this role was the establishment of the Royal Irish Constabulary Special Reserve, also known as the Black and Tans. The Black and Tans were largely composed of former World War I soldiers, and under the command of Winston Churchill, they were responsible for the torching of Cork City, during which they beat, shot at and robbed civilians and prevented fires from being put out by cutting off hoses and shooting at firefighters. During the sack of Balbriggan, the Black and Tans burned more than 50 homes and businesses in County Dublin and killed 2 local men. The Black and Tans were also responsible for the massacre at Croke Park on the day that would later be known as Bloody Sunday, where the humble servants of the state began a stop-and-search operation at a Gaelic football match and, without warning, opened fire on players and spectators alike, killing 14 innocent people and wounding over 60 others. More than 30 people were killed or wounded. Earlier that day, British intelligence operatives had assassinated 15 men in their homes, and in the evening, 2 Irish Republicans and a civilian were beaten and shot dead in Dublin Castle. Ugh. Okay, well, perhaps not old Winnie's finest hour, but at least he wasn't responsible for the potato famine. In a way, that's an improvement on British foreign policy towards the Irish, right? Ugh. Not even I believe what I'm saying anymore. Okay, forget about Ireland. Forget about India. Churchill was awful in India, awful in Ireland. Where else can I look? There must be something, there must be somewhere that proves Churchill was innocent in all of this. After all, he's on our money. He must be a benevolent and all-powerful God King. There's no way he could be a monster. If we start labelling Churchill a monster, then who is next? George Washington? Christopher Columbus? I suppose we'll be cancelling Genghis Khan next. Part 3. Kenya. Oh God. Please tell me this one makes him look better than I expect it will. Listen. All I wanted was to be vindicated as the patriot that I am. All of our national heroes should be people we can relate to and aspire to be. I can't be the Queen because I was born poor. I can't be William the Conqueror because I'm not a French-speaking Viking with an army. I can't be any British icon for the 1970s TV because I'm not a paedophile. And who does that leave? Ant and Dec. Can you imagine them on our money? Would they both go on the same note? Think of the logistical problems that alone would cause. It would crash our entire economy. Okay, so if we're going to argue that Churchill wasn't a racist, there's no better counter-argument than his treatment of the Kenyans. And unlike our example at Ireland, we can't even argue that this was before he saw the evils of fascism in World War II. Some of the worst things Churchill was responsible for, he did after the Second World War, having seen the logical conclusion of some of his undeniable imperialist and racist beliefs and the horrors they could bring. Look, British Empire is a patriot and a loyal Britain to the end, but even I hate fascists. So let's not beat around the bush here. I don't want to sugarcoat this with my little quips and whataboutisms. They'll come back in the next section. I just want to lay this out as plain as can be. What is now Kenya was once a settler colonial state, where 7 million acres of land had been stolen from the locals and given over to white settler farmers, with natives forced to serve under them as labourers. In what later became known as the Mau Mau Rebellion, the locals rose up against the British, leading the declaration of a state of emergency in the colony. Churchill, who was Prime Minister at the time, oversaw the forcing of 150,000 Kenyans into concentration camps, where the captured locals were raped, tortured with electricity and executed. We may never know the full extent of the horrors committed by the British in Kenya during this time, since most of the evidence of British colonial crimes was destroyed to make sure our crimes could never be known in full, and that post-colonial Africa would not inherit the knowledge of what Churchill and his colleagues had done to the Kenyan people. On this one, I'm afraid, we must cede ground.
Little Momo. nĩ kĩndũ gĩekĩrirwo nĩ tuge nĩ settlers, tondũ nĩrĩo atuire andũ akĩmeta loyal na nĩgetha mahote kũganio, na akĩmeta mau mau nĩgetha mahũrĩke. No gũtiarĩ kĩndũ ta mau mau, gũtiarĩ kĩndũ ta kĩu kĩarĩ kuo. Gĩtũmi gĩa kuga nĩtũkwenda nĩtũgũkorwo tũkĩyatha nĩ ũndũ wa thĩna twarĩ naguo, tondũ mũthũngũ settlers iria ciarĩ thĩinĩ wa Kenya nĩciatũhũthĩire ũru, tondũ kana kanini twagetaga bwana, mũtumia wake tũkamwĩta mami saba, na ũngĩaga kũmwĩta ũguo no akũhũrire. Wathiĩ kũruta wĩra kana ona niĩ mwene no gũtondũ ndarutaga wĩra ndereba, ngĩona nĩarahinyĩrĩria, rĩu tũkĩmenya kũmwĩra rĩu nĩtũkwenda wĩyathi, rĩu tũgĩkĩũmba tũkwenda wĩyathi. Tũrĩ thĩinĩ wa kĩama getagwo Kenya African Union, nĩkĩo getagwo KAU, ndarĩ trustee. Rĩu nĩkĩo gatũme nyitwo, no ndianyitirwo ũndũ wa kũmĩhũma, tondũ niĩ ndiũĩ muma, ndinjoinĩte thĩinĩ wa gũkorwo ndĩ gĩthaka, no harĩ gwĩtia wĩyathi nginya ũmũthĩ ona niĩ ndona ũiganĩire ũrĩa menaguo. Niĩ thiĩte kambĩ ĩmwe 16, twathiaga thithinma rĩngĩ tũgĩikara kuo, rĩu kũu nĩkuo twakũrire thĩna mũnene mũno. Andũ arĩa marĩ kuo tũgũcurio kũndũ igũrũ guokainamio, ũhũragwo na maĩ gũkũ ũguo, nĩkuo rĩu kũigua, ndingĩinama ũguo no ngathimũra. Rĩu twagĩthiĩ hora, twaikara kũu hora, twaikarire kiugũ, tũgĩikara handũ ta ha thaa 4 gũtarĩ kũhingũre, tũrĩ thĩinĩ wa kambĩ tũkĩmenya kũrĩ na ũndũ. Rĩrĩa tuonire thigari ciaiyũrio nja, thigari nyingĩ mũno ikĩiyũra, kuma hau tũkĩhingũrĩrwo ithuothe. Twakĩhingũrĩrwo tũgĩthiĩ tũkĩrutwo nja ya kiugũ ya kambĩ, twarutwo nja tũgĩkora thigari ciĩharĩirie. Niĩ na niĩ mwene kuma hau rĩu ciahũragwo, niĩ na niĩ nĩndaringirwo, ndaringwo ona ndiacokia kwĩigua. Rĩu ngĩgĩkĩra, kuma hau ndiacokire kwaria rĩngĩ, ndacokire kwĩyona ndĩ thibitarĩ. Kuma thibitarĩ ndeyonire rĩrĩa mũthũngũ okaga kũracimba, tondũ kwerirwo tũkuĩte andũ 12 nĩguo kwanagĩrĩrwo, twathiĩ kũrĩrĩra cimba ciakĩroragwo nĩgetha imenyeke nĩndakorwo itarĩ mũkuũ.
Ndikira gikombe-inĩ ni njĩtagwo Jane Muthoni, na rĩu mũciĩ nĩguo ũyũ gwakwa nĩ gũkũ. Gũkũ rĩu nĩ kwa athĩni arĩa mate indo ciao. Kuma hĩndĩ ĩrĩa ndokire na tũtirĩ mĩgũnda, ithuĩ tũrĩmaga kwa andũ, mũndũ akona kĩng'otore gĩa kũgũra mũtu. Niĩ nĩ ndarĩ mũndũ wa gũceragia irio ũrĩa mekuma na gũkũ igũrũ, ũgatũma mũndũ nake arĩ mũrũngamĩrĩri o ta niĩ tũgathiĩ gwetha irio tũkaiga, na mũrũ wa maitũ arĩ gĩthaka. Ora mukuru kwini. Nili kendanyitiro. Nigo na ndatiro kunyito nigetha njukaniriro. Kuri ara mekirito iciri. Tondu twacaguritwo iritu tutahage mai kuu kabaini. Uguo airitu omwiritu omwe noe wacukanire. Andu airitu mahurwo akiuga aya ng'ania ni wa kiria. No mau no twaragira mau irio. Naigo akiuga haria turi ni no guka ndokire nginyitwo. Hindi iyo ri gutia twaranago igoti-ini twanyitagwo kuria twari riu kuigwo twatahaga mai twanyitwo tukirehogo na gukwa handu hangi haha tukire hetagwo gatithi. Uguo riu kuu kwari kuigena kwari hama kuu ni kuhuro. Atumia aria matwaragwo kuu ni mekagwo uru tondu mekagirwo micoro.
Maybe I should change my name for the last part of this video. It's starting to feel a little bloody. What would be different? Bridget... The Holiday? Doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? Conclusion. The original anti-fascist. Well, now that we've got the sincerity out of the way, it's time for me to wrap all this up with a neat little bow. So, what did we learn today? We learned that Winston Churchill might have been more than a little racist. The Irish probably have good reasons to want to spit on his grave, and if one more British soldier sets foot on Kenyan soil, then Satan's hand will personally reach out of the ground and pull the whole of England into hell forever. But aren't we forgetting something? For all of his flaws, and fair enough, there were many, Winston Churchill did preside over the ultimate defeat of fascism in the 20th century. Yes, if we get to the fact, it wasn't just the British, the Russians played an arguably much bigger role, the Americans were involved, and Britain did make loaded promises it didn't intend to keep to its colonies to get them to involve themselves in the war, which they did in massive numbers. But still, Churchill was there. He was involved. He was, undoubtedly, a player. In the resolution of the Second World War. Case closed. Churchill, the original anti-fascist. Of course, to make this argument, we'd have to cut this segment out here, the one about how Churchill accused Jews of a worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization on the basis of envious malevolence. Also, please make sure, Dan, that you cut out the quotes from Old Winnie saying, "If I'd been an Italian, I'm sure I would have been wholeheartedly with Mussolini from the start to finish in his triumphant struggle against the bestial appetites and passions of Leninism. What a man! I have lost my heart. Fascism has rendered its service to the entire world. In the conflict between fascism and Bolshevism, there was no doubt where my sympathies and convictions lay." Yeah, that's not a good look. Can we cut that? Are we okay to cut that? Okay, yeah, good. Let's cut that. He defeated Hitler. That's the point we want to make, yeah? Okay, good. Oh, hold on. We're going to need to cut this quote too, where he expresses admiration for Hitler. The courage, the perseverance, the vital force which enabled him to overcome all resistances which barred his path. Because if we leave that in, it'll be clear that was in 1935, and Churchill will have known that the resistances, as he called them, were being sent to concentration camps. That's a bad look. Okay, let's cut that. Let's cut that. Start over, yeah? Okay, great. But still, Churchill was there. He was involved. He was undoubtedly the player in the resolution of the Second World War. Without our big, strong Tory boy, Britain would have fallen to fascism. Churchill personally, in a metaphorical sense of course, went over to Germany and single-handedly, with no help from the Red Army or the various colonies he'd previously starved into submission, punched Hitler in his Jew-hating face. There, take that, the woke left. You should be thanking Churchill for everything he did. Case closed. Churchill, the original anti-fascist. Did we cut? Good. Good. Oh God. Dan, I think I'm going to throw up. Don't put any of that woke nonsense in my script again, Dan. You're fired. I don't care if it's true. It makes Britain look bad. How am I going to get invited to the Spectator Garden Party again if you go around putting uncomfortable truths in my content? Go home and think about what you've done. Oh, and cue up that Vera Lynn song. That'll make them forget about our war crimes for a minute. Good. Richard? Hire me a new writer, One who didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. Jesus Christ. Get Boris on the phone. I need to ask him if he knew this stuff. Christ, even I might tear down this statue now. Churchill. Jesus Christ, who knew? What a bastard. Hey, it's me. Bridget Empire. Like and subscribe if this was fun or if it wasn't, and give me money so it becomes more fun on patreon.com/Bridget Empire or ko-fi.com/Bridget Empire for a one-time donation. Yeah, let me know what you think. Only if it's good, and give me money so I can get better sets and scripts and stuff, and I'll make better content for you. If you give me money on Patreon, I'll read your name at the end in a funny voice, and wouldn't that be great? You can make me do weird ones if you want, and if you give me £1,000, I'll get your name tattooed on my back. I've made that promise on camera now, so I'm gonna have to stand by it. There's plenty of space back there. Get that there. Prime real estate. Goodbye. Cheers.